What's going on, guys? This is Hajimoto, and today we're going to be taking apart our Evanix Air Speed, tearing it down to the most basic parts, and then throwing it back together. And while we have it apart, we're going to install the Jefferson State Power Kit, which ups the power on this old boy. So this is already one kick-ass semi-automatic, but it's going to even have more foot-pounds of energy when we're done. So hang in there, guys, and we'll go through it together. Okay, guys, we're going to get started. This camera here will come into the front view so that you can see from this angle, and then up here I've got another camera that comes down so that you get a different perspective. First thing I'm going to do is just get this scope off. We don't need that on. Get that off. Next thing I'm going to do is just take off that little safety arm that sticks out here. It's a little guy, and on the side here there's a little Allen screw sitting right inside there. We're going to go ahead and take that out so we can get that little guy off. And what that does is it puts in a little button that comes off of the safety, but you can't take the action out of the stock if you don't remove that. So that we've got that off. Now on the bottom of the stock we have an Allen right in there. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's a 3 or 4. Let's try 4. That's it. So the 4mm is now removed, and at this point, now that we have that off the trigger, the entire action will come out of the stock, just like that. Now we have the action. And on the Evanix, it's a very simplistic system. The trigger assembly is one block that's on the bottom. The side cocking has the 4 little screws, and then the plate comes off. The actual cocking mechanism itself is really nothing more than a hook that hooks over the bar. So I think where I'm going to start with this, first thing I'm going to do is take the barrel shroud off. So we'll take the end cap off. Now on this particular rifle, I have the HP baffle system installed, so we're going to go ahead and remove those. We're also going to loosen the shroud, take it off. Which will show us the HP air stripper and the rest of our baffle kit. We can see here that the diffusers that we made are still intact, so we're going to take off the air stripper. And what I use is a piece of wood so that I don't mar the barrel up, and I just tap off the HP air stripper. And we'll just put that to the side. We'll take off the 2 diffusers. Now we're going to deal with the action assembly. So for that, I'm going to turn the rifle over, and we're going to remove the pins that hold in the trigger assembly here, and that is these two guys, there's one pin on each side, and all we're going to do is just push those straight through. And we're going to retain the two pins. And now the trigger assembly has been, as an assembly, is removed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is there's a small grub screw that runs fore to aft that holds a pin down inside, which is our pivot point for the cocking lever. Also, there's the cap for the hammer spring. I like to remove this when I'm taking the rifle apart so I'm not fighting moving when I'm trying to move the lever. So the first thing we're going to do is just take this cap off, and behind that's going to be our hammer spring and plunger. Okay, there's our hammer spring and plunger. And now we're going to take off this little guy at the top. It runs forward and back. That holds that pin in. And at this point we should be able to pull our cocking lever back and disengage the hook so that that's free floating. I'm now going to take this little Allen key and I'm just simply going to grab the pin and pull up on it like that. Now the cocking lever can come right off and out of the way. The way that this rifle is put together, it has an upper and a lower stack to it, and we're going to take off this access cover here so that we can show you more what's going on. These number 1 Phillips screws. We'll take those out. Now we have our plate off. Now in here, you'll see, I'll move this back and forth, and you can see that there's an upper section for our probe. The lower is the hammer, and they're both connected by a pin that goes from top to bottom. So in order to get this assembly out, there's one additional fastener here that has this stop. We have to take that stop off anyway in order to put in the Jefferson State Power Kit. So we'll go ahead and get that fastener out. And at this point, that little end cap can come out. So we're going to try to remove that. Like that. At this point, our assembly, which is the upper and the lower, which is connected by a pin from the upper and the lower section, you can see moves back and forth. We can't have it come out the back because of that pin that's in between the two. This pin, which is what our cocking bolt hooks onto. But if you look right here, we've got a large Allen key. If we take that Allen grub screw out, we can then pull the pin through this hole, and then both those assemblies will be able to come out. With that grub screw out, and with the hammer pushed forward, we should be able to reach right in there and pull the pin out that holds these two together. And all I'm doing is putting a small Allen key in the pin, and I'm drawing straight up to pull the pin out. And that right there is the pin that holds the probe to the hammer. At this point, we can now push all the way to the rear. That's our pellet probe. And down bottom is the part of the action that runs into the valve. which is our weight and our hammer. So this aims forward, and the way that this is made is the valve that's up in the front, the hammer goes forward internally, hits the valve, this is blown backwards, and because it's tied together with a pin on the top like this, what it does is it transposes the energy this way, which cocks it, pushes another pellet in. So that's the way the system works, and there's no fasteners on any of this. It all just fits together. So there you go, guys. There's all of our assembly taken apart. We're going to go ahead and put it back together again. If you wanted to take the barrel off, these two screws, and you can draw the barrel out this way, comes off just like most air rifles do, and that's it. As you can see, it's a very simplistic design. In here, what I like to do is just put a little bit of silicone on the moving parts so that everything has got a little coating on it. That way it slides well and there's no issue. So now we're going to reverse the assembly process here, and we'll get our Jefferson State Power kit ready. Have that on the side here, ready to go. And the way I like to start is taking the hammer with the hole pointing up. You want the long section towards the rear of the rifle. We're going to go ahead and put that in, and we're going to push it all the way forward. Next, our pellet probe is uniform inside, so it doesn't matter if that hole is pointing up or this hole is pointing up. It's uniform, so it's the same on either side. Just make sure the hole is pointing up and get that inside, push it in, push it all the way to the front, like that. At this point, when you look down through, what we're trying to do is we're going to try to line up the upper and the lower so that we can get these two tied together by putting that pin in that I was telling you about that we took out, this guy here. So what I'm doing is, now that I can see that I'm lined up with the pellet probe, I'm moving the pellet probe back and forth to make sure that I can get it started, and then I'm just pushing it down, and then from the side here I'm looking down inside this cavity, and you can see down inside there, you can see the groove that that pin's supposed to set into. What we're doing is we're just aiming it up so that the pin is straight up, and now I'm going to take and push the pin, gingerly push the pin down, engaging into the lower half, like that. Now our upper and the lower are tied back together again, and they will move back and forth as one. Keeping it forward, we'll take the large grub screw, place it back in, okay. Now what we're going to do is put in the Jefferson State Power kit, putting in spring first, and there's a flat section on the bottom which is very similar to the piece that we took out. So we take that, install it in flat to the bottom, and we get our fastener ready, get it all ready to go, and we're going to push this guy in, which pushes that forward, and we're going to put the fastener back in again. Put a little bit of tension on that, tighten it up, good to go. At this point, we can now take our cocking lever, put that in the corner like this, take our pin, hole up, drop that in the corner, line it up so she drops into the piece itself. Make sure it's all the way seated. Take the small grub screw that runs fore to aft. Put that in. Now that we have the small grub screw in to keep the pin from coming out, I'll show you how I put the hook back on. Before we put in the Jefferson State power kit, you could slide this back and forth with no problem, because without our hammer spring in, nothing was pushing the unit forward. But now that we have that power spring in there, it's going to be tough to try to get this to slide back by hand. So what I'll do is I'll take a tool, I'll push the bolt back like this so that I'm exposing a gap in the front here. And I've just put a piece of wood across so that it keeps it held back. Now at this point, I can just take my hook, drop it on, and it's all set. While I've got that held back though, I'm going to take advantage of that and put our plate back on and our 4 small screws. Okay, while we have this out, I want to talk about one thing that the Air Speed is notorious for, and it'll cause you some problems if you don't keep an eye on it. If you look right here at the end of this tool, you'll see a small little screw here. It's a flathead screw that's inside there. That screw sometimes will back out, and what it'll do is it'll catch on this plate. So as you're trying to cock the rifle, it can't go through here because the screw is sticking up. So if you can, take that out, put a little Loctite on it, and then tighten it down so that you won't have that backing out. So if you start having an issue where the rifle doesn't want to cock, just take a look at that screw, because I think you might find that be the problem. Now that we're all set back here, I'm going to just pull this back so I can take the piece of wood out, and now the unit will go forward like it's supposed to. At this point, we can reintroduce our hammer spring, but before we do that, we're going to go ahead and put in our trigger assembly. Now, as you may remember, there was a way that you could take the trigger assembly and slide it forward or back for more power. Rearward is supposed to put more pre-energy on it, but now that we have our power kit in there, it's really not necessary to do that. So what we're going to do is, you can see there's a hole here and here. Those are going to go in the forward 2 holes. What we're going to do is, while we have this in place, we're going to take the rear pin, put it through the rear hole, like that. With the rear pin through, we want to push down on the block and then pull the trigger so that you can see it drop. This is important, okay? That won't go down until you pull the trigger. Now it sits down and you're ready to put in the forward pin. With those pins in, the rifle is now back, reassembled, and we're good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and put in our hammer spring with the end cap, and we'll go ahead and secure it. Now that the rifle is back assembled, we'll go ahead and put it in the stock. Okay guys, we're going to go ahead and put our action back into the stock now. What we're going to do is make sure that everything is in good, clean order. We don't have anything that's in between here. We want to keep an eye on these pins, making sure that they're flush, because as this goes to go into the stock itself, if they're sticking out, they're going to hit on the top here and cause damage to the stock, and we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is go ahead and introduce the action into the stock. Now that the action is in the stock itself, we'll turn the stock over, making sure we support the action because it will just fall out. Using our Allen key, we're just going to make sure that we're aligned with the hole. I'm going to go ahead and drop in the fastener, and we'll tighten it up. Now that that's done, we've got to put on that small trigger tab that we took off. You might remember that it sticks out so that it prevents us from taking the action out of the stock because it sticks up. That would be this little guy here. The nub is going to be on the right hand side. What I like to do is get it started by having it through the trigger, and then I'll hold the small little nub onto the fastener and then tighten. Okay, that's now tight, ready to go. At this point, we're going to put our diffusers back on and then reintroduce the barrel and the end cap. Okay, we'll put our air diffusers back onto the barrel, slide those down to the end. Reinstall our HP air stripper, pressing straight back so that it sits all the way against the barrel. Light tap to make sure it's there. Small amount of silicone is applied to the O-ring and inside the end of the shroud. Passes over the air stripper and then through the barrel band. When we get to our diffuser material, we'll go ahead and work them in to the barrel shroud. And what I like to do is make sure that that diffuser material is pushed up so that I can see that through my holes. I see the material in the holes there, and I know that it's not going to bunch up down bottom. Now that we know that we're up far enough, I'll go ahead and push it the rest of the way on, engaging the rear threads for the collar. And we'll go ahead and tighten our shroud. Shroud's good and tight. At this point, we're going to reinstall the HP baffle system that we had installed. Collar first. Short baffle. Long baffle. Short baffle. Now the long, while pressing in, tap on the shroud just to make sure they're all properly engaged. Reintroduce our end cap. Put our end piece back on. And this rifle is back reassembled. Well guys, there it is, all torn down to its most primal parts and all put back together again. And while we had it apart, we went and put in the Jefferson State Power Kit, which adds a lot more foot-pounds of energy from this rifle. At some point I'll do a review and show you that so that you can compare it against my first review so you can see the energy that this thing produces. That's pretty much it. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the description area below in the comments, and I promise you I will, providing they're respectful, I will respond. You guys take it easy, shoot safe, and we'll see you on the next one.